Marry my daughter or lose everything.
The dying CEO said. The Mafia boss's answer shocked the family. Two attorneys stood at the foot of a dying man's bed, like vultures who'd already picked out the good cuts. 5 children circled the room, each one certain the empire belonged to them by right of blood. Then Vincent Castellano's eyes found the one person who hadn't spoken since arriving. Marry my daughter. His voice carried none of the weakness his body was drowning in. Or lose everything you've built. Every attorney in that room expected panic. They got something else entirely. Dario Reyes asked one question that made the whole room go completely still. A question that revealed he already knew exactly what was happening inside this family. Subscribe right now and drop your city in the comments because what happens in the next 10 minutes is going to leave you speechless. Like, share, notifications on. You are not ready for this story. Vincent Castellano had built 30 years of empire from nothing. Territory, silence, the specific quality of fear his name produced in men who'd never once met him. Now he was dying in a private hospital suite, cancer eating through him faster than any doctor had predicted, and the room around his bed had filled with exactly the kind of people who circled dying men. 2 attorneys stood at the foot of his bed, a legally binding document already prepared and waiting for signatures. His 5 children, Marcus, Bianca, Raphael, Sophia, and Isabella, arranged themselves throughout the room with the specific hunger of people who'd spent their entire lives waiting for exactly this moment. Isabella stood near the window, apart from her siblings, her arms crossed tight against her chest. She was the only one who wasn't smiling. Dario Reyes stood near the door, having arrived at Vincent's specific request, delivered through a private message 2 hours earlier, offering no explanation beyond the word urgent. He controlled half the city's underground shipping routes without ever needing theatrical displays of violence to maintain that control. 38 years old, composed, the specific dangerous quiet of a man who'd built respect through patient competence rather than fear. He had no idea why Vincent Castellano, a man he'd met exactly twice in 15 years of operating in the same criminal underworld, had summoned him to a deathbed surrounded by family. Vincent's eyes found him across the room. Dario. His voice was rough, weakened by illness, but carrying an authority that hadn't diminished, despite everything eating away at his body. Come closer. Dario crossed the room without hesitation, ignoring the confused, suspicious glances from Vincent's children. Vincent's eyes moved briefly to his daughter by the window before settling back on Dario with devastating clarity. I need you to marry Isabella. The room went completely silent. Marcus's composed expression cracked slightly. Bianca's mouth fell open. Isabella's face drained of color, fury and humiliation crashing across her features in equal measure. Father, what are you? Isabella's voice cut through the silence, sharp and disbelieving. Vincent's hand rose slightly, silencing her without a single raised word. Marry her, Dario. His voice carried absolute unshakable finality. Or lose everything you've built. My organization has resources that could dismantle your shipping network within a month if I direct them to before I die. I need you to understand I'm not asking. The attorneys at the foot of the bed shifted uncomfortably, the specific legal document they'd prepared suddenly carrying weight considerably heavier than either of them had anticipated when Vincent dictated its terms 3 days earlier. Isabella's siblings watched Dario with the specific calculating assessment of people trying to determine exactly how this development affected their own inheritance, their own position, their own carefully calculated futures. Isabella herself stood frozen near the window, watching her father discuss her marriage like a business transaction in front of a room full of witnesses, watching the man she'd never met before today process an ultimatum that would reshape the rest of her life. Dario's expression remained carefully composed, none of the panic or calculation the family expected crossing his features. He didn't look at Isabella. He looked directly at Vincent. How long has the Delgado organization been receiving information from inside this family? The question landed in that hospital room like a physical blow. Vincent's expression shifted from weakened authority into something considerably more alert, genuine surprise flickering behind his exhausted eyes. Marcus's composed grief cracked entirely for one devastating second before he forced his expression back into careful neutrality. Isabella's fury gave way to shock, her mind racing to understand how this stranger, summoned to her father's deathbed under mysterious circumstances, already knew details about a conspiracy she'd only discovered herself 3 weeks earlier. The attorneys exchanged glances, neither of them prepared for a response that had absolutely nothing to do with marriage terms or business assets. Dario's calm, unhurried voice filled the silence. "Because I think you already know exactly which organization has been selling your secrets, Mr. Castellano. And I think you know exactly why that matters to me." Vincent studied Dario's face for a long, weighted moment, something passing between the two men that nobody else in that room could fully comprehend. 3 weeks earlier, Isabella had been reviewing routine financial audits for her father's organization when she'd noticed something that didn't quite fit. Territorial disputes that resolved with suspicious precision, timing patterns that suggested someone possessed detailed advance knowledge rather than simple luck. She'd pulled deeper records that night, cross-referencing shipment schedules against territorial conflicts that had cost her father 2 of his most loyal men over the past year. The pattern that emerged was too precise to be coincidence. Someone inside her own family's organization had been feeding detailed intelligence to the Delgado family for over a year, information specific enough to explain every territorial loss, every ambush that seemed unrelated, but that Isabella's careful analysis revealed followed a devastating pattern. She'd brought the evidence directly to her father rather than to her siblings, understanding with sickening clarity that the leak was almost certainly someone in her own family. Vincent's health had declined with alarming speed in the weeks following that conversation, his cancer accelerating in ways his doctors struggled to explain, though Isabella hadn't yet made the full connection between her devastating discovery and her father's rapid collapse. Now, standing in this hospital room watching her father discuss her marriage while a complete stranger somehow already understood details about the exact conspiracy she'd uncovered, Isabella felt the ground shifting beneath her in ways she couldn't fully process. Vincent's exhausted eyes held Dario's steady gaze. "You know about the Delgado family." It wasn't a question. "I know considerably more than you'd expect, Mr. Castellano." Dario's voice carried genuine, controlled precision. "The organization that's been feeding on your family for over a year happens to be the exact same organization that murdered my wife 4 years ago." The room's silence deepened into something considerably heavier. Isabella's siblings exchanged confused, uncertain glances, their calculated assessment of the situation shifting into genuine uncertainty as they processed information that had nothing to do with the inheritance they'd arrived expecting to discuss. Isabella herself stared at Dario with dawning, devastating comprehension, understanding for the first time that whatever was happening in this room carried weight considerably beyond a dying man's desperate attempt to secure his daughter's future through traditional arrangement. Vincent's expression carried genuine, exhausted relief, the specific weight of a man who'd been searching for exactly this kind of connection without fully knowing it existed. "Then you understand why I need you specifically." His voice weakened further, urgency bleeding through the exhaustion. "I don't have time left to build the kind of case that would expose whoever's been selling my family's secrets. I need someone with resources and motivation considerably beyond simple obligation to protect what I'm leaving behind." Dario's controlled gaze finally shifted to Isabella, studying her for the first time since entering the room, taking in her fury, her confusion, her fear disguised as anger. "I need to know one thing before I answer." His voice carried genuine directness. "Does she know what you're actually asking of her? Or does she believe this is simply about property and obligation?" Isabella's voice cut through the room before her father could answer, sharp and furious. "I'm standing right here." Her eyes moved between Dario and her father, genuine anger replacing her earlier shock. Maybe someone should actually explain to me what's happening, instead of discussing my future like I'm a piece of furniture being negotiated over. Vincent's exhausted eyes met his daughter's, something genuinely apologetic crossing his weakened features for the first time since the conversation began. "Isabella, sweetheart." His voice carried paternal weight beneath its exhaustion. "I need you to understand something before I explain everything. The evidence you brought me 3 weeks ago, it's not simply a business problem." His eyes moved to Dario, then back to his daughter. "It's the reason you're in genuine danger the moment I stop breathing." Isabella's fury faltered at those words, genuine fear replacing anger as she processed the specific weight of her father's admission. "What do you mean, danger?" Vincent's exhausted eyes carried genuine paternal grief now, the calculation of his ultimatum giving way to something considerably more vulnerable. "The financial records you found, the pattern of territorial disputes. I didn't just review them, Isabella. I've spent 3 weeks conducting my own investigation, and what I found confirms exactly what you suspected. Someone inside this family has been feeding detailed intelligence to the Delgado organization for over a year." Isabella's siblings shifted uncomfortably, Marcus's expression carrying careful, composed neutrality that betrayed nothing, while his mind raced through implications he understood considerably better than anyone else in that room. "The information they've received explains every territorial loss we've suffered," Vincent continued, his voice weakening but carrying genuine urgency. "Every ambush that looked unrelated but wasn't. 2 of my most loyal men are dead because someone in this family sold us out, and once I'm gone, whoever did this will have every reason to eliminate you specifically, Isabella, because you're the one who found the evidence." Dario's controlled voice cut through the room's tension. "That's why the marriage isn't about property or obligation, Isabella. Your father needs someone with the resources and motivation to protect you after his death. Someone whose own reasons for pursuing the Delgado organization run considerably deeper than simple family loyalty." Isabella's eyes moved between Dario and her father, genuine devastation crossing her features as the full weight of the situation settled over her. "You're saying I'm being married off because my life is actually in danger?" Her voice carried raw, unguarded fear now. "Not because my father wants grandchildren or a strategic business alliance. Because I might be murdered by my own family's business partners the moment he dies." Vincent's exhausted silence confirmed her devastating conclusion. Dario's voice remained steady, controlled. "I told you the Delgado organization killed my wife 4 years ago. It was ruled a random carjacking. It wasn't random. Elena's family had threatened to expose Delgado territory violations, and they eliminated her to send a message. I've spent 4 years building a case against them, patient and methodical, because moving against a rival organization without absolute proof gets you killed considerably faster than waiting does." His eyes held Vincent's steady gaze. "Your ultimatum isn't complying with a dying man's fear, Mr. Castellano. It's giving me exactly the access point my investigation has been missing." Marcus's composed expression cracked slightly at those words, genuine alarm flickering behind his careful neutrality, before he forced his features back into practiced grief. Isabella noticed the flicker, her sharp analytical mind already beginning to process implications she hadn't fully considered until this exact moment. Vincent's voice carried genuine urgency as his strength continued fading. "I need someone who will actually pursue this threat with real investment, not simple family obligation. My own men have failed to identify the leak in 3 weeks despite my direct instruction to find it. Dario's 4 years of patient investigation means he understands this organization considerably better than anyone else I could turn to." Isabella's fury gave way to something considerably more complicated, genuine fear warring with dawning understanding of exactly what her father was actually offering her. "Is anyone going to ask what I actually want?" Her voice cut through the room's tension, sharp and furious despite the genuine fear underneath it. "Or have I simply become the instrument 2 men are using to solve their own separate wars?" Dario's expression shifted, something like genuine respect crossing his controlled features at her direct challenge. "That's a fair question, and you deserve a direct answer." His voice carried unexpected honesty. "I have no interest in a marriage built on deception. If you agree to this arrangement, you should understand completely what you're actually agreeing to. I intend to use whatever access this marriage provides to investigate the exact conspiracy threatening your life. Your own knowledge of the financial records and territorial patterns you discovered could prove invaluable to identifying whoever betrayed your family." Isabella studied him for a long, waited moment, her sharp mind already processing the specific implications of what he was actually proposing. "You're not asking me to simply be your wife." Her voice carried genuine, dawning understanding. "You're asking me to be your investigative partner in exposing whoever inside my own family sold us out." "Precisely." Dario's voice carried genuine directness. "Because I think you're considerably more capable than anyone in this room has given you credit for, and because your own discovery 3 weeks ago proves you already possess exactly the analytical skill this investigation requires." Vincent's exhausted eyes carried genuine paternal pride watching this exchange unfold. "I told you she was sharp, Dario. Sharper than any of my other children, though none of them would ever admit that out loud." Marcus's composed expression tightened further at that specific comment, genuine tension building beneath his careful neutrality that Isabella's sharp attention finally fully registered. Her eyes moved to her brother, studying his controlled reaction with sudden, devastating clarity. Isabella's mind raced back through 3 weeks of financial records, cross-referencing access patterns and territorial knowledge against the specific people who would have had opportunity to feed information to the Delgado organization. Marcus had handled the eastern shipping routes for the past 2 years. Every territorial dispute that followed the leaked information pattern had occurred in territory Marcus directly controlled. Her breath caught slightly, the specific, devastating realization crystallizing with terrifying speed. Vincent noticed his daughter's expression shift, his exhausted eyes moving between Isabella and Marcus with growing, painful understanding of exactly where her thoughts had traveled. "Isabella." His voice carried genuine warning now, urgent despite his weakness. "We'll discuss the specific details of the investigation privately. Not here." But Isabella's eyes remained fixed on her brother, watching Marcus's composed grief finally crack entirely under the weight of her direct, unflinching attention. "Marcus," her voice carried devastating, quiet certainty. "You handled the eastern routes. Every territorial loss happened in your territory." The room's tension detonated instantly, Marcus's careful composure shattering completely as his siblings turned toward him with dawning, horrified comprehension. "That's not proof of anything." Marcus's voice carried genuine panic beneath his attempted defensiveness. "Plenty of people had access to that information, Isabella. You're grasping at coincidence because you want someone to blame." Dario's controlled voice cut through the chaos, calm and absolutely certain. "Isabella's instincts aren't grasping at coincidence, Marcus. I've spent 4 years learning exactly how organizations like Delgado operate, exactly what patterns their infiltration produces. Everything she's just identified matches precisely what I'd expect to find if someone with direct territorial control was feeding them information." Marcus's face drained of color, genuine fear finally breaking through his careful composure entirely. Vincent's exhausted voice carried devastating, quiet finality. "Marcus, look at me." His son's eyes lifted reluctantly to meet his father's weakened gaze. "Tell me the truth right now, or I promise you Dario's 4 years of investigation will find it anyway, and you'll have wasted your last chance to explain yourself before I die." The room held its breath, waiting for Marcus's response, the specific, devastating weight of a year-long betrayal finally reaching the precipice of complete exposure in front of an entire family gathered around a dying man's bed. Marcus's silence stretched unbearably long, the entire room watching him with devastating anticipation, before his composure finally, completely collapsed. You don't understand what it's been like, his voice cracked, genuine bitterness bleeding through years of carefully maintained composure. Working twice as hard as everyone else, running the eastern routes flawlessly, and you still looked at Isabella like she was the only child worth trusting with anything important. Vincent's exhausted expression carried genuine devastation. So you sold your own family to the Delgado organization out of jealousy. It started small. Marcus's voice carried genuine desperation now, the weight of confession finally breaking through months of careful concealment. A single piece of information, nothing that seemed significant. But they kept asking for more, and by the time I understood how deep I was, there was no way out that didn't end with either the Delgados or my own family destroying me. Isabella stared at her brother, genuine devastation crossing her features. 2 of Father's men died because of information you sold. Her voice carried raw, unguarded fury now. You endangered this entire family because you were jealous of me. Marcus's silence confirmed everything, his shoulders sagging under the weight of a year-long betrayal finally, completely exposed. Dario's controlled voice cut through the room's devastating tension. The Delgado organization is going to view Marcus's exposure as a critical threat to their entire infiltration operation. If they believe their year-long access to Castellano territory is compromised, they'll move immediately to eliminate every loose end, including Isabella, whose investigation exposed all of this in the first place. Vincent's exhausted eyes carried genuine urgency. Then we don't have time to waste on family drama. Marcus, whatever consequences you face from this family, they'll wait. Right now, we need to move against the Delgado organization before they realize their infiltration has been exposed. Dario was already pulling out his phone, dialing a number with controlled efficiency. Detective Cruz, it's Dario Reyes. I need you at Castellano Memorial Hospital immediately. We've identified the internal source feeding Delgado their intelligence, and I believe they're about to move against a specific target. Detective Renata Cruz arrived within 20 minutes, her federal credentials providing exactly the institutional authority Dario's private investigation had been missing for 4 years. Her expression carried immediate, professional focus as Dario briefed her on Marcus's confession and the specific pattern of intelligence that had been feeding the Delgado organization's territorial expansion. This matches precisely what my own investigation has been tracking for the past year. Cruz's voice carried genuine urgency. We've had surveillance on Delgado operations, but we've never had direct confirmation of their internal source until now. This changes everything about how quickly we need to move. Marcus's panic intensified as he processed the reality of federal involvement, his desperate calculation racing toward damage control. I can help you. I still have contact information, communication channels. If you're trying to build a case against them, I can provide. You'll provide everything you know, Marcus. Cruz's voice carried flat, professional authority. Whether that helps your own legal situation depends entirely on how completely you cooperate right now. Isabella watched her brother's desperate scramble for self-preservation with something considerably more complicated than simple anger. Genuine grief for the family relationship his betrayal had permanently destroyed settling alongside her fury. Vincent's health continued declining rapidly as the investigation's urgency intensified, his final days consumed by providing whatever institutional knowledge and resources he could offer before his approaching death. Marcus's desperate attempt to control the narrative backfired catastrophically 3 days later. Isabella discovered, through careful analysis of Marcus's phone records that Detective Cruz's team had obtained, that her brother had made a panicked call to his Delgado contact immediately following the hospital confrontation, informing them that his sister and the man she was about to marry had identified enough of the conspiracy to expose everything within days. He's accelerating their timeline. Isabella's voice carried genuine alarm as she brought the discovery to Dario and Cruz. He told them we're close to exposing everything. They're not going to wait for a careful, methodical exposure. They're going to strike before we can complete our investigation. Dario's expression sharpened with immediate, focused concern. Do we know what target they're planning? Cruz's team had already begun cross-referencing Delgado communication patterns, her expression carrying genuine urgency as new intelligence assembled. There's an engagement dinner scheduled for tomorrow evening. Small gathering, minimal security, meant to be private before the wedding ceremony. If Delgado believes this is their last opportunity before their infiltration is completely exposed, that's exactly the kind of vulnerable window they'd target. Isabella's blood went cold, genuine fear crystallizing into focused determination. They're going to come after me at my own engagement dinner. Vincent, informed of the escalating threat from his hospital bed, carried genuine paternal anguish beneath his rapidly failing strength. Then we ensure that dinner becomes the trap that ends this conspiracy, not the moment it succeeds against my daughter. Dario's controlled voice carried absolute, focused determination as he began coordinating with his own shipping network security alongside Detective Cruz's federal resources. We have less than 24 hours to prepare a defense capable of anticipating exactly how Delgado operatives will attempt to breach that dinner's security. Isabella's sharp analytical mind engaged fully with the crisis, her own understanding of her family's business patterns and the specific territorial information Marcus had leaked, providing crucial insight into exactly how Delgado's methodology typically operated. I know how they think. Her voice carried genuine, focused determination. I've spent 3 weeks studying every pattern of their infiltration. If they're planning to move against me directly, I can help identify exactly where they'll try to breach security. Dario studied her for a long moment, genuine respect crossing his controlled features. Then let's make sure they walk directly into exactly the confrontation they're trying to avoid. Vincent's exhausted voice carried devastating finality from his hospital bed as the final preparations began. I won't live to see how this ends. His eyes found Isabella's with genuine paternal love beneath his failing strength. But I need you to understand something before whatever happens tomorrow night. I chose Dario because I recognized in him the same patient, methodical determination that built this entire organization. You needed someone who would fight for you with genuine investment, not simple obligation. I believe, with everything I have left, that I chose correctly. Isabella's eyes filled with tears, genuine grief and gratitude colliding as she processed her father's final, devastating confession. Vincent Castellano died 6 hours later, surrounded by the family whose future he'd spent his final weeks desperately trying to protect. His last conscious moments spent ensuring his youngest daughter possessed every resource necessary to survive the conspiracy that had already cost him everything else. Vincent's death arrived at the exact moment his family needed his strength most. But his final words carried Isabella through the devastating grief of losing her father, while simultaneously preparing to face the exact threat he'd spent his last weeks trying to protect her from. Dario's response to Vincent's passing carried none of his usual controlled composure, genuine urgency replacing 4 years of patient methodology, as he understood that Isabella's protection now depended entirely on completing an investigation that suddenly carried considerably more immediate stakes than his careful pursuit of Elena's killers had ever required. Detective Cruz's federal team worked through the night alongside Dario's shipping network security, assembling a comprehensive defense for the engagement dinner scheduled less than 18 hours after Vincent's death. We proceed with the dinner as planned. Dario's voice carried absolute, focused determination during the final briefing. Delgado believes they're moving against a vulnerable target during a moment of genuine family grief. We use that assumption against them. Isabella's own sharp analytical instincts proved instrumental throughout the preparation, her understanding of her family's business patterns, identifying exactly how Delgado operatives would likely attempt to breach the event's security. They'll come through the service entrance. Her voice carried genuine, methodical certainty. It's the least monitored access point, and my father's security protocols never fully addressed that vulnerability because we never anticipated an internal betrayal revealing it. Cruz's team repositioned their coverage based on Isabella's analysis, federal agents and Dario's private security working in careful, coordinated tandem to create exactly the trap Vincent had envisioned in his final hours. The engagement dinner proceeded the following evening, with devastating, controlled tension beneath its surface calm. Isabella stood beside Dario, her black mourning dress a stark contrast to the celebration everyone present understood was actually a carefully constructed ambush. Marcus, held in federal custody following his confession, remained absent from the gathering, his year-long betrayal, finally, completely answered for through Detective Cruz's ongoing investigation. The Delgado operatives moved precisely as Isabella had predicted, 4 armed figures attempting to breach the service entrance during what they believed was the exact vulnerable window before Dario's investigation could fully expose their infiltration. They found nothing resembling vulnerability. Dario's shipping network security, combined with Detective Cruz's federal backup, intercepted the breach attempt with devastating, coordinated precision, the confrontation unfolding exactly as the trap had been designed to execute. Isabella watched from the reinforced safe room where Dario had insisted she remain during the confrontation, her composed courage under genuine mortal danger, revealing the specific strength her father had recognized in her long before this crisis fully materialized. The operation concluded within 20 minutes. The Delgado operatives neutralized and detained, their attempted strike transformed from a devastating threat into the exact evidence needed to completely dismantle the organization's year-long infiltration of Castellano territory. Dario found Isabella in the safe room once the threat had been fully contained, his expression carrying genuine relief the moment he confirmed she remained unharmed. "It's over." His voice carried quiet certainty. "Delgado's infiltration is completely exposed. Detective Cruz has enough evidence now to dismantle their entire operation." Isabella rose slowly, processing the devastating weight of the past 48 hours, settling into something resembling genuine relief. "And Elena's killers, the same evidence that exposes their infiltration of my family, also connects directly to the assassination 4 years ago." Dario's voice carried genuine, complicated emotion. Detective Cruz's federal case will finally hold them accountable for both conspiracies. The Delgado organization's collapse unfolded over the following weeks, with the specific brutal finality both Dario's private investigation and Detective Cruz's federal case had been building toward across years of patient, methodical work. Marcus's confession, combined with the captured operative's testimony, provided comprehensive evidence that dismantled the organization's territorial expansion entirely. The conspiracy that had killed Elena Reyes 4 years earlier finally, permanently answered for, alongside the immediate threat against Isabella. Marcus faced federal charges for his year-long betrayal, his personal resentment, and greed toward his father's favoritism of Isabella having driven him to endanger his entire family. The specific, devastating reality of his choices finally carrying consequences that couldn't be negotiated or excused away. Weeks passed following the conspiracy's complete resolution. Isabella and Dario's marriage, evolving from strategic necessity into something built on genuine partnership and mutual respect, forged through the shared crisis that had brought them together under such devastating circumstances. Mia's uncomplicated warmth toward Isabella deepened naturally into genuine affection, the 8-year-old finding in her father's new wife a specific quiet strength that reminded her, in small unexpected moments, of the mother she barely remembered. Isabella found herself, in the weeks following her father's funeral, genuinely surprised by how naturally she'd settled into partnership with a man she'd initially believed was simply complying with a dying man's desperate fear. "You never actually answered my question," she said one evening, sitting across from Dario in the quiet study of his estate, Mia already asleep upstairs. "That first day, whether you were only marrying me because my father threatened your organization or because you recognized something else entirely." Dario studied her for a long moment, genuine honesty crossing his controlled features. I recognized someone whose sharp mind and genuine courage matched exactly what I needed to finally close the case I'd been carrying alone for 4 years. His voice carried quiet, unguarded warmth. What I found afterward was considerably more than I expected to find in a marriage that started as strategic necessity. Isabella's own guarded composure softened completely, understanding finally settling over her that whatever this marriage had started as, it had become something neither of them had specifically planned for when her father first delivered his devastating ultimatum. Months later, Isabella stood beside Dario at her father's grave, the specific weight of understanding finally settling completely over her regarding what Vincent's final act had actually represented. He wasn't trying to control me. Her voice carried genuine, hard-won peace as she studied her father's headstone. He was trying to protect me the only way he knew how, by finding the one man capable of actually fighting for me with genuine investment rather than simple obligation. Dario's hand found hers, the specific, quiet certainty of two people who'd built something real from a foundation neither of them had chosen settling between them completely. He chose well. Isabella looked at him, genuine warmth replacing the fury and fear that had defined their first devastating encounter in that hospital room months earlier. I think he did too. The cemetery around them carried none of the danger and calculation that had once defined every corner of the conspiracy that had brought them together. It simply carried something considerably more valuable. A family, genuinely chosen, standing together in quiet, earned peace. If this story kept you holding your breath from that devastating ultimatum to this final graveside moment, if it reminded you that sometimes the people who claim to control our lives are actually trying desperately to save them, subscribe right now because we are not finished. Share this with someone who needs it today. Like this video, drop your city below, and turn on notifications because the next story is already loaded.